Crossover Thursday with Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. Let's roll.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's Thursday. It's week 9, and that means Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This time, Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, the one and only Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns as we preview Sunday's matchup with a whole lot of damn unknowns. We will break down big storylines, key matchups, path to victory, etc. This is going to be a fun one. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. It's been a couple years since the Cardinals have played the Cleveland Browns. The Cliff Kingsbury-led Arizona Cardinals went to Cleveland and got a W the last time they played. The trajectory for these teams couldn't be more different, but the unknown for the trajectory of these teams couldn't be more similar through 9 weeks. It just looks very differently. Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd on Twitter, at Clancy's Corner for me. Deshaun Watson, obviously the biggest storyline out of this entire game, the biggest storyline since he was traded, got the full guaranteed contract, fresh out of Ballers. The Rock had it first, but in real life, it was Deshaun Watson. Talk to me about Deshaun Watson this year. Talk to me about him on Sunday. And what are the alternatives, whether it be P.J. Walker or the rookie out of UCLA?
Well, I think from what we got from today, I think we were all a little bit more surprised about how much Deshaun Watson did today. And there was, a lot put out. I mean, there's not, usually a lot put out from practice. But the ball certainly looked crisper. Like the Indianapolis week was weird. And I was aggravated by it. I was aggravated because, if you thought it was going to be Deshaun, he didn't practice Wednesday. He practiced a little bit Thursday, practiced Friday, Saturday. Okay, he's going to go. But obviously you saw right away he wasn't ready to go. One of the biggest questions I have is with Deshaun is the issue when the pads go on with this shoulder injury, because we've gone through these instances of him practicing it today, obviously in practice, no pads, look good though. I mean, and the balls look pretty solid and looked kind of like what we expect DW to look like. But as far as the season, look, and everybody's so critical of him all the time he's missed, but his last start for the Cleveland Browns was the best start he's had in his entire career with the Cleveland Browns against Tennessee Titans. Looked good. And even the odd thing about the injury, his last ball that day was a 52-yard touchdown pass to Amari Cooper. So the fact that this injury came up after that just seemed really peculiar, I would say. So there's a lot of negativity, and obviously, with Deshaun and the off-field stuff, there's people who are just never going to root for him a day in his life, and I get it. I certainly understand, people and their, being, just not a fan of this man in general. But look, we got a job to do. We have to cover the team that's in front of us. You don't get to pick the assignment. You're given the assignment. You got to do the best of your ability. People, and there's so many when are we going to trade this? Grade this as one of the worst trades in NFL history. Look, I get it, what we're looking at right now, but I mean, you're trying to tell me that we're going to look at a movie, that's going to go 2.5 hours and we're at the 35-minute mark, and you're trying to say, well, let's judge the movie now. Well, I mean, we haven't gotten to the entire plot yet. We haven't gotten to the final part of the yet. I mean, there's people that are supposed to be in this movie that are in it. So it's been difficult from that standpoint. Look, you go to the Pittsburgh Steelers game week 2, obviously that's on him. I mean, you got to sense the pass rush. You can't give up a fumble late in the game to get returned for a touchdown. The first play of the game, he throws an interception. Those things are on him. Gave up 2 touchdowns, which cost them that game. The Browns very easily, in a weird way, could be 6-1. They really could be, which is crazy. And obviously that's, riling up the fan base. Now, as far as Sunday, I personally, in my show yesterday, did a segment. I really thought it was time to go back to DTR. And it's not a knock on PJ Walker, but the point is, if you think DTR is going to be your long-term backup quarterback, you think he's got to be able to be equivalent to what PJ Walker's done at this point. And, but the Browns, there's a lot invested here, and you don't want to, and they already did this once to DTR. He had to start the Raven game, didn't find out till 10:35 in the morning, making your first NFL start. You find out 2.5 hours before. And there's so much going on. So it's like, all right, offensive coordinator, let's go over this again real quick. Blah, blah, blah. And everybody, Stefanski kept it simple. What do you expect him to do? Throw a rookie out there in his first start against the Baltimore Ravens and this, that, the other thing. And, they got boat raced, obviously. But PJ Walker will start if it's not Deshaun Watson. I think the Browns are also coming at this with a similar theory as to what they did in the Colts game. They think that if Deshaun can go, they'd like to play him, understanding there may be some rust. There may be, but they have the Ravens right afterwards. They have the Steelers right afterwards. So they'd rather not him just walk back in and have to play, obviously, two conference rivals, two teams, both run odd man fronts, which is one of the Achilles heels for the Cleveland Browns. It always has been. So if they can get him through this first week, and basically hopefully get, and this is now the new Russ, not the old Russ, because there's always talk about the old Russ from all the time that Deshaun Watson missed. But that is the plan. And as much as they put out there of him today, and Jimmy Haslam was at practice today. So I think this is kind of be like a group census because everybody's going to be involved in this decision. But the amount of reps he took today, it seems to me like he would be the guy on Sunday. And, and I did say this again as well last night. The Browns didn't make a move at quarterback yesterday. So in some way, somehow, that tells you that they have to be feeling that Deshaun is getting much, much closer, maybe not to 100%, but maybe north of 90%, which will be a lot more comfortable with him playing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jeff Lloyd locked on Browns. Alex Clancy locked on Cardinals. You could say, dad joke incoming, it's a tune-up game for Deshaun Watson. It was too easy, damn it, Jeffrey, because Clayton Tune most likely will be starting for the Arizona Cardinals. He took first-team reps yesterday. Just like the multiple different potential storylines for the rest of the season in Cleveland, there were less in Arizona, but with still the same kind of uncertainty. Now with Deshaun Watson, it was injury-based. Some people thought it was kind of mental. It was like a mental capacity, like a mental barrier that he had to get over, at least from this side. I know, Jeff, you know a lot more about that than I do, but it's very cut and dry with the Arizona Cardinals. They traded Joshua Dobbs. Clayton Tune, fifth-round pick out of Houston, is going to be starting. For everydayers of Locked On Cardinals, you know that I thought that Clayton Tune should have started week 1. That was before they traded for Joshua Dobbs when Colt McCoy was still on the roster, because who cares? Whoever's starting for the Cardinals ain't going to be the QB1 until when Kyler Murray comes back. So this is going to be probably a one and done for Clayton Tune. He was inaccurate during the preseason, but he showed the ability to huck it down the field, to unlock the vertical portion of this offense. And it'll be interesting to see a Drew Petzing offense going into the Lions' den, or the dog pound as it were, where a lot of that defense will know what the Cardinals are running in some capacity. Even though, Kevin Stefanski called the plays, Drew Petzing was close enough, and this offense is a Cleveland Browns infused offense. So it's going to look very similar to what they see in practice every day. So that's one thing that I'm somewhat worried about, especially with Clayton Tune and his first snaps in an actual NFL game with Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith on the other side. Denzel Ward. I mean, the Cleveland Browns have, nightmare fuel over there, giving up less than 20 points per game on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be PJ Walker versus Clayton Tune, or it's going to be Deshaun Watson coming back off shoulder injury versus Clayton Tune. This is going to be a litmus test for both teams in very different ways. Cleveland should have no trouble with the Arizona Cardinals. But, Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns, I've said that about every single team the Arizona Cardinals have played this year, and every single team the Arizona Cardinals have played have been in one-score games aside from the San Francisco game at halftime. The Cardinals have had leads. The Cardinals have been in contention throughout the majority of the 8 weeks. And that's something that is the biggest enigma going on right now. Like, this stuff must really be working with a team devoid of talent that is being able to stay in contention with very good NFL teams. So we're going to talk about matchups. Jeff and I could do 3 hours on this game. Like, we already talked for half an hour before we hit record. We're like, we should probably record some of this and talk about it. So let's get into key matchups. It's going to be mirroring. We already know it's going to be very similar for both sides. But can the wide receivers for Cleveland take advantage of the Arizona Cardinals secondary? Can the Cardinals keep Myles Garrett out of the backfield like no other team on the planet can? And vice versa for the Browns. We'll discuss it next as we roll on here on a crossover Thursday. Alex Clancy, Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Cardinals, Locked On Browns. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by DoorDash. So in Arizona, at least, there are a couple places that don't deliver on their own. there are a couple places that I love to eat at. And there are times in the day where I can't leave my place. I work from home for both jobs. I'm constantly on Twitter, recording, getting content out, and I just need a ferry, something or other, to show up at my doorstep and give me food. And luckily, DoorDash is that entity for me. You like Postino, you like Julio's too. Those are two of my favorite places here in Phoenix that don't deliver on their own. DoorDash will get you there. Very simple. Half an hour later, 20 minutes later, beep boop, you got food at your doorstep. It's that simple. And with this offer, it makes it even better. Get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Again, get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply. He is Jeff Lloyd at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd on Twitter, Locked on Browns host. I'm Alex Clancy at Clancy's Corner on Twitter, free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Week 9 matchup, 4-3 Browns, 1-7 Arizona Cardinals. Jeff, really quickly, because this is an interesting thing. Most times for teams, it is better to be very good or very bad. And Cleveland has kind of been in the middle. 4-3 through 7 weeks. They've had their bye week already. They blew out Cincinnati week 1, looked not so great down the stretch. And I know it's been a carousel of quarterbacks throughout the year so far. Is this a team that can make a push with the roster as currently constructed, even though they lost Donovan Peoples-Jones to a trade before the trade deadline?
Well, and you factor in that they lost Nick Chubb, but you go into last week.
Chubb, obviously, right.
But you go into last week, they were second in the NFL in rushing. And look, Nick Chubb was never a guy the Browns had to re-sign. And analytically, you don't re-sign running backs according to the analytics. But
right.
When you point your finger at a player and you say, I want you to come here to play a Cleveland Brown, and that is the way you carry yourself, the Browns were at a tough spot. They had to re-sign Nick Chubb at the time. But now you see what the vision is through the analytic lens. They're still running the ball well, obviously. Pierre Strong, Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt. Are the three of them combined as good as Nick Chubb? Probably not, but that's okay. And all of this was supposed to be a transition year anyway. They were supposed to be transitioning to a team that threw the ball more anyway with Deshaun Watson, the changes in the offense. Like you talked about, offenses are going to be similar. It's going to be a case where it's not the X's and the O's. It's most likely going to be the Billies and the Joes who are, basically, executing the X's and O's that are going to make the difference. Right. So for me, though, but the thing, for the Browns, they're just going to have to go at it at the defensive side of the ball, even though they have no idea what's coming. I mean, you look at Clayton Tune, and look, if they want to fire up some preseason tape, they can. But it's obviously going to be a different version here. They do have an idea of what Drew Petzing likes to do, but this is one where you just got to go out and dominate. And, there's been weeks where this defense has just been absolutely just knocked down, drag them out like a bully in the corner. You took the wrong turn late at night, and guess what? You're getting your wallet taken, you're getting your phone taken, you're losing your money, and you're going to get a mud hole stomped in you. But there's also been times where they make a lot of plays behind the backfield against Seattle, prime example. But meanwhile, you're getting torched for 25 a pop, when you're giving up 8-9 plays for 20 yards. So the small blow-ups of plays of, either 1 yard, 0 yards, -1 yard, those don't look as great when you're giving up 25-yard plays or a Kenneth Walker run for 45 yards. Granted, Seattle probably a little bit more balanced, a little bit more talented on the offensive side of the ball than Arizona is. But for me, that's the fear factor. But also, you're at home. So Clayton Tune is going to Cleveland. And look, it's not the easiest place to play. And look, there was already snowfall on the ground this morning in Cleveland. So Arizona could be walking in there going, well, I mean, this is like late December weather. I mean, and it could be, just November, 4th, 5th, whatever it is. And oh my God, this is, wow, we're wearing the long sleeves, all of this stuff. So it could be, a factor in that regard. But this is one defensively, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't just go dictate it. Go take it. The only question for them really on the defense side of the ball, injury-wise, is Darius Smith, has a little bit of a neck thing going on. They think he's going to be able to go, which gives the Browns, length at their defensive end position. Their defensive tackle has been great. Their secondary, Greg Newsom's a little banged up there as well, so we'll see how that works out. But granted, they had a rookie, Cam Mitchell, who should have changed the game with an interception last week, did drop it. It would have been an easy pick six, and nobody would have ever talked about the 3rd and 3 play call that everybody disagreed with and bantered about. But for me, that's kind of what I'm worried about. Look, I mean, it's not the days where you had Larry Fitzgerald and it was going to be 9 for 126 and 2 touchdowns. And how did you combat everything out? John Connor obviously on IR. There's no way Kyler Murray was going to play this week. I mean, you'd be foolish to put him out there against the defensive line. But for the Browns, it's the unknown and not knowing exactly what this team can do, but which just tells me then it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? If you're better across the board on one side of the ball, just do you, because it's not going to matter what they do.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good point. I mean, it's with James Conner on IR, it does hurt. Amari DeMarcado, undrafted rookie out of TCU, has been taking the lion's share. He had 20 carries for 80 yards last week. What the Cardinals have done all year is, I mean, up until lately when Joshua Dobbs has turned into a turnover factory, he was in the first week, and then he has been in the last couple weeks, and now obviously no longer with the organization. But with the Cardinals,
I heard about that because maybe some people said, "Oh, well, let's trade a pick and bring Josh Dobbs back," and there's just not enough alcohol, Alex. But go ahead.
I know. No, but the thing is, it's interesting. So let me go through, because Joshua Dobbs, there's a lot more intertwining here than I originally thought with these two teams, as we currently sit. So, matchups it's always been, it's going to be Jalti Froholt and the left guard versus Myles Garrett. That's going to be it. It's going to be Will Hernandez, depending on where he lines up on the line. Paris Johnson Jr., I'm sure will have to chip. I'm sure he's going to line up outside sometimes, even though, Jeff, you mentioned he's been lining up a lot more inside. He kind of does whatever the hell he wants. Let Myles Garrett do whatever the hell he wants. Go. And that's something the Cardinals are going to have to just, mitigate. I mean, they're if he's living in the backfield, doesn't matter who the quarterback is. If it's Kyler Murray, if it's Patrick Mahomes, if he's living in the backfield, you're not going to win that game. So that's really the main thing. And then also, can the Cardinals run the ball? That's the matchup. Can they run the ball? Can the best defense for the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday will be keeping the Browns offense on the field? And it's close, or Browns offense off the field. And it's close because Myles Garrett accounts for 3 touchdowns a week, it seems like. So it's not necessarily as cut and dry as it normally is. But I do want to ask just quickly, like, what I've seen, I did my podcast live on Tuesday after they traded Joshua Dobbs. And he was here for 7 weeks. He was here for like 9 weeks total, or whatever, 11 weeks total, 10 weeks total. And I was going through and I was like, I need to thank him. Like, what he did, although not pretty, they didn't win any games, but he played competent, well above what people thought he could do in an offense that I knew a part of a little bit last year, but as the starter, he kept this team in games. He wasn't great. He threw bad balls. He threw 2 of the worst interceptions I've ever seen last week. But he played pretty good football for a backup with no talent on defense, kind of a ragtag offense with injuries and otherwise. He didn't do a terrible job, and he's a good dude, and he ingratiated himself right away to the organization. It's like it could have been a lot damn worse through 8 weeks for the Cardinals. Right?
Well, and the thing was, look, the Browns had him the summer before, and obviously he was the backup quarterback all last year. Once Deshaun came back, that was it. You were keeping Jacoby Brissett around. You released him till all of a sudden he ended up, actually, I think it was Detroit for a hot minute. Then it was Tennessee, where he ended up starting 2 games. And the guy had never started in the NFL before. You got to keep in mind, but this year they bring him back, and he and Deshaun have a relationship. Both have the same quarterback coach in Quincy Avery. So it was one of those things where it was, they had a relationship, and it's just somebody else you can go to. When the iPad comes out, okay, a coach tore you a new one. Look, I'm going to be here. This is what he saw. This is what you missed. That type of thing. But then you got to the summer, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson just went out week after week and played really, really well. And it was like, well, and it's the old Colts thing, we don't practice effed, but it was, well, and then you guys called, and obviously, Petsing with them related. Do you want a 5th round pick for Josh Dobbs? And the Browns thinking was, well, we don't care because neither one of these guys are even going to do what Deshaun Watson can do. So sure, go ahead. He's all yours. We drafted the rookie anyway with this thought process. You ended up with PJ Walker, and look, there's warts and there's a lot of ugliness to it, but somehow, some way, this guy did go 2-1, had a game-winning drive on the road in Indianapolis. beat the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, you get the credit, beat, maybe a little, being a little bit, extreme as far as using that word. But I think we're done. I think we're done with the PJ Walker talk. And again, for me, it would have been DTR. They still say it's going to be PJ Walker. I think it's probably going to be Deshaun. But I mean, for Josh Dobbs, it's hard not to be happy for the guy, but people, trying to bring it back. And the point is, and even for Jacoby Brissett, well, guys, they might not even start. So these people were having legit arguments and cursing at me. And I'm like, well, even still, if they come back and say, because you got traded, you're not saying I'll be there tomorrow. I might be there Thursday. And they're not going to start on Sunday. So it would have been PJ Walker anyway. And then hopefully it was Deshaun Watson from there on out. So it's like, and there's such an affinity for mediocre players with the Cleveland fan. And I love it. I do. I love it because you go to bat for your guys. But it's like, guys, they all suck. PJ Walker's not good. Josh Dobbs is not good. Maybe DTR could be good. But none of them are Deshaun Watson. They all suck. So if we got to play any one of these guys, we're going to start talking draft on Locked On Browns. You're all going to be pissed, but that'd be the direction of the show.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense. And it's just, I didn't realize, how hard it was for Josh Dobbs just to come in and do what he did. It wasn't elite level. It wasn't an average level for a good portion.
I was stunned that you started him week one. It was like he's been there long enough that he started.
Yeah, I know. It was less than 2 weeks. It just didn't make any sense. But, this is just this is one big tryout in 2023 for 2024 for the Cardinals. They're going to play guys. They're going to make guys inactive. They're going to see what guys are like when they get all the snaps. They're going to be like, it's just kind of a controlled chaos for the Cardinals. And Joshua Dobbs was the quintessential dictionary definition of that for the Cardinals this year. Let's move to past a victory next. Mine are going to be the same as they always are. Jeff doesn't know what those are, which is fantastic. That's why we do Crossover Thursday. Jeff Lloyd, Locked on Browns. Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. As we roll on here, this episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks. I always joke, I'm like, can I just say that for a minute? That would be a hell of a live read. But the cool part about Prize Picks, now, normally you can win up to 25 times your cheese during the football season. But guess what? Basketball's back. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. So what does that mean? A league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. What does that mean? Here's an example. LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. So it's both combined, and you could choose more or less than you normally would, as you normally would with Prize Picks. They have quick and easy deposits, super easy, quick and easy withdrawals. You can use Apple Pay now. They've got you covered for everything. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Final segment here, Week 9 Crossover Thursday. Oh, I haven't done my disclaimer this week. Appreciate football. Jeff, I've been doing this once a week. Normally, people will love football for 4 weeks, first 4 weeks, and then the last 4 weeks. Everything in the middle, people take for granted. Most times we do also. I refuse to do it. I refuse to do it. I'm pinching myself. We're in the middle of the season, man. Half the season's gone. And it's like kickoff for week 1 was last week. Appreciate football. Anyways, past a victory. I'm going to go first here because these are very simple for the Cardinals, and they're also almost insurmountable at most times without Kyler Murray at quarterback. 1, get after the quarterback. Any quarterback that's pressured has the proclivity to potentially make more mistakes than if they were having tea parties in the backfield untouched. Obvious, right? The Cardinals' pass rush has been a spectrum of awful and non-existent to where the hell is that then? And where the Cardinals can wreak havoc is Nick Rallis just sending blitzers at a higher percentage. You're on the road. There's a good chance the defense of the Browns will hold the Cardinals offense at bay. So the defense is really going to have to find an in to be able to get to whoever starts at quarterback, which in turn will allow the secondary to be more opportunistic and the inferior talent level. The best friend for an inferior cornerback room is a good pass rush. The Cardinals have to do it, and they got to win the turnover battle without turning the ball over themselves. Those are the 2 big ones for me because the offense the offense can't afford to turn the ball over. The defense has turned opposing teams over, but case in point, the Rams turned the ball over 3 times, and the Cardinals offense turned that into 3 total points. Because the offense is not where it needs to be, the Cardinals can not only not turn the ball over, but must turn the Cleveland Browns offense over if they want to keep this game close.
Well, for the Browns, look, I mean, even if it's going to be Deshaun and, but even still, if it was PJ Walker, this team, as much as this year was supposed to be about the transition to a more of a passing team, their offensive line, it's not there yet as far as transitioning to a team that pass pros more than they run block. This offensive line was assembled to be a good run blocking unit. So it doesn't matter that it's not Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford, and that was crazy last week because we're talking about a guy that left the facility on Wednesday in a walking boot, but somehow made a flight to Seattle on Saturday and played significantly in the fourth quarter, so much so that they didn't play Kareem Hunt in the fourth quarter, which they probably should have. But one thing I've been screaming about was Pierre Strong. This was a move they made over the summer. This move was made while Nick Chubb was still highly involved, obviously well before the injury. He runs a 4.35. He's got good size at 6'1", 220. I mean, it's not your legitimate running back who's built like he is and has the speed that he does. He sees cutback lanes, which is a huge, huge part of the Cleveland Browns running game. So I said this all week long last week, and then he goes out to the tune in Seattle of 11 touches for 80+ yards. Hey, what do you know? Every now and then we get one right? So this is a guy that just kind of got to push, and it's not a knock on Jerome Ford. And when you got 3 running backs, which means essentially you don't have any, what do? You ride the hot hand. You ride the guy who's looking the best at the time. Granted, Kareem Hunt has scored, I believe it's 3 straight games. He scored 4 touchdowns in 3 straight games. There should be a role for him. But if it is Deshaun, and there will be a transition here, people bring up no Donovan Peoples-Jones and the fact that the Browns traded him. Look, he had single-digit receptions this year. This is a guy that was in the 40s in like 830 yards last year. He was nowhere near that pace. It's not a knock on Donovan Peoples-Jones. Elijah Moore came in, more mouths to feed. David Njoku is probably the guy that should be taking targets away from both Moore and maybe Donovan Peoples-Jones. And you still have Amari Cooper, who's playing really, really well, even as he progresses. He just makes plays. So there was no room for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Plus, they had no room they weren't going to re-sign him anyway. So you put Donovan in a great position. You send him to Detroit. It's where he's from. He's on a tail. He went from 3rd in the AFC North to 1st in the NFC North. Oh, I mean, I'm not crying for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Yeah. And guess what? I'm not catching any passes, and I'm in a contract year anyway. So maybe I get a playoff game or 2. That's going to at least help my value there. But you got to start working on just what are the basics of the offense. It's the running back. It's David Njoku. It's Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore gets open a lot. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They just can't seem to find him. Defensively, it just go after it because you don't want to know what you can't sit around and say, well, we don't know what they're going to do. So what are you going to do? You're going to let them dictate? You're going to let a rookie come into Cleveland, couldn't beat out Josh Dobbs for a start for 8 weeks, but he's all of a sudden going to come to Cleveland and he's going to dictate the way this game goes? That would be a joke. And I got a news for you. Jim Schwartz don't work like that. He's telling Clayton Tune, guess what? You're going to see 95, you're going to see 99, you're going to see 94. And let me a name that I absolutely want to say, Maurice Hurst. Maurice Hurst drafted years ago. His draft process went to crap because they thought he had a heart condition. Maurice Hurst is a top 5 PFF defensive tackle right now. The Browns signed him for peanuts, no guaranteed money. And this guy is out there balling. His interception last week, it's very rare you see a defensive tackle make an interception like that. Be the hammer. Be the hammer. Don't be the nail. And the Browns should win this game easily. You could beat Cincinnati at home by 20+. You could beat Tennessee at home by 20+. There's no reason that this shouldn't be, I don't want to say a laugher, but there's no reason that this shouldn't be an easy one where maybe towards the end of the game you're saying, all right, Deshaun, that's a good day. We're just going to take you out because it's not close anymore. But, if they get close, then that's when the worst things happen to the Browns. When games get late, because they all get in their heads. And, you get to a situation. Look, I will never disagree with the play call that coach. Would I have run it 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000? Yes. But there were players open. Or you could have told PJ Walker, we're calling a pass play. But you know what? I'm calling a running back leak. So as soon as he leaks, get in his can and follow him wherever he goes. And I don't care if you don't get the first down. You're going to get to the 2-minute warning. We're going to punt it, and they're going to have to go maybe at worst 80 yards with 2 timeouts. But didn't get done, lost another one. Go out there, reclaim what you got, because that makes it 5-3. And maybe now you're talking Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and this is when business picks up again. But then again for the Browns, right after that, the schedule lightens up a lot.
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating for the Browns and the Cardinals just to kind of see what it's going to be like. I said on yesterday's podcast, the Arizona Cardinals season starts in week 10 when Kyler Murray comes back and James Conner's ready to return from IR. If he is in fact healthy, he's eligible to return. This is going to be one of those games like Jeff. I've talked to my everydayers about going into every game except for probably week 1. I could be like, this is going to be one where the Cardinals are going to go down 24-0, and it's just going to be a laugher, as you call it. There hasn't been one of those this season. And that's a testament to Jonathan Gannon, preparation, to Drew Petzing, especially with the offense, to Nick Rallis utilizing the skill set that he does have, even though it's kind of inferior, especially with injuries or otherwise, Budda Baker, etc. But there hasn't been one where it's like, oh no, this is going to get ugly early. A lot of times the Cardinals score first. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. Inclement weather, really tough place to play at the Dog Pound, first-time starter, 5th-round pick out of Houston. I mean, Clayton Tune won a whole bunch of games in college, okay? He was I think they lost to Desmond Ritter's Cincinnati to get into the playoff. If he played 6 years in college, he's hucked it, okay? But this could be one of those. I don't know if it will be. We will see. Alex Clancy, Jeff Lloyd, crossover Thursday, free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube for Locked On Browns and Locked On Cardinals. We will talk to you on our respective podcasts tomorrow.